Hello folks, welcome to the canal channel Jose. Today we're going to explain the 5 things that you should not be cheap on your car, because these things can actually create a problem or a headache and if you're away from home. And with that, let's get started. And the first thing you should not be cheap on is tires. These components are the ones that take all the weight of your car, and these are the ones that are going to get you from point A to point B and even beyond that. So if you start buying cheap tires or used tires, you don't know the history of those tires, so they might be dry, cracked, and you might be out in the road and it's going to leave you stranded on the side of the road, or even worse, it can create an accident. So why buying cheap tires when you can spend a couple more dollars and buy some brand new tires and put them into your car? And if you're having issues that your tires are getting worn out from one side or the other, and that's why you're buying cheap tires, take care of that problem, because that's a problem for the tire, and then that's creating another problem where you are buying cheap tires just because you're getting those tires worn out quick, so you're spending less money on a tire, which is actually dumping money into the pit. So replace or take care of that issue if it's an alignment or a bad ball joint or a suspension. That way you get rid of that problem and you can start buying some good tires that you can trust, and it can get you safe home, because these are the ones that take all the control of the car, and if these tires are in bad shape, you might even get into an accident. So don't be cheap and buy some good tires and fix those problems. Another place you shouldn't be cheap on your car is when you're adding water to the radiator, because just adding water or tap water is going to create a problem where there's going to be corrosion build up, or even minerals. It's just going to clog up your radiator, because all those minerals are going to clog up those fine fins or those ports that go in the radiator. Is going to create corrosion in the water pump, even in the water jackets of the engine. So water is actually not, it's cheap, but it's going to create a problem in the future, so you want to avoid that. Instead, add antifreeze. 50-50 is just fine, but just don't add just water. You recommend it to add antifreeze into the engine. It's made to protect, lubricate the engine, and it also keeps the engine or the water inside the engine from freezing on really low temperatures. So next time you're adding water to the radiator, just don't add water. Invest on antifreeze. That way you can avoid problems in the future, because it's going to cost you more money in the long run than you think. Another place that you shouldn't be cheap on your car is when you're adding oil or doing an oil change, because these engines on today's day, they're more precise, so they require synthetic oil and they require a specific weight. So if you're replacing the oil on your engine of your car, why not invest in a little bit more money, because you're not doing it every day. This is gonna make your engine last longer, so that way you don't have to replace an engine or even buy a new car. Also remember to replace the oil filter when you do the oil change, so that way everything stays clean within the engine. And why not invest some money into a new air filter, because all those contaminants on the air, the dust and everything that's going to be sucked into the engine is going to be trapped in this guy, and this guy is in charge of keeping the air going into the engine clean, so that way the valves stay clean and all the components in the internal of the engine is a cleaner combustion, so that way you don't have bad valves at a shorter time. So that way, with a good oil change and a good air filter, your engine lasts longer and it stays cleaner for longer as well, so that way you don't spend more money on expensive repairs. So other components that you shouldn't be cheap on is a belt and hoses, because if you start noticing that the belt is ripping or cracking or is wearing out, and then you don't replace it because I'll do it later, and then this belt goes bad and it just snaps, and then the engine starts overheating, now you got a bigger problem than just a belt. Now you got an overheating engine that you might even replace the engine or rebuild it, which is going to cost you a lot of money, when you could have just spent a couple dollars on a belt compared to the percentage of what you're going to pay for an engine. Also, the water hoses, if you start noticing that they're expanding or they're having cracks or they're leaking, it's time to replace those hoses, because these hoses are going to keep the engine cooling every time. These engines are in charge of guiding the water from the component to component, and if these hoses are not in good shape, you're gonna have a bad day when one of these goes out, because you're gonna end up in the side of the road or in an unexpected area. You were just adding antifreeze to the system to top it off just because you noticed it that it was leaking, but you never took care of it. But now you're in a different situation where you are gonna have to call a tow truck, or even a worse scenario where your car can overheat because one of these guys went out but you knew about it. So invest some money into it so you can avoid bigger problems in the future. Another components that we shouldn't be cheap on our car is the fuses and relays. If relays and fuses are being installed for a purpose, because there's a problem in the electrical system, instead of creating a fire, that fuse is gonna burn out, and that way it's gonna stop the problem for actually getting worse. But if you, instead of putting a fuse or buying a relay for this component, and you just put a straight piece of wire, which shouldn't be done, not installing a fuse, you're actually creating a hazardous problem for your car, which can actually create a fire now. So instead of putting a fuse, you put a piece of wire or a bigger piece of metal that is not 30 amps or 20 amps as it should. Now you're gonna create a bigger problem or even an accident for yourself. So instead of spending a couple dollars on one of these items, you're just installing a piece of wire. Instead of $5, now you're gonna have to buy a new car. So next time, don't be cheap. Buy a fuse or the right piece that goes in the electrical compartment, so that way you avoid problems. And if there's that component keeps on burning out, investigate why. That's telling you that there's a problem, so don't be cheap on it. Fix it, and that way you can keep your car on the road. Well, next time you gotta do some maintenance or some adding liquids, or you're gonna look underneath your hood, make sure you wanna spend a little bit more money if you find a problem, especially when you're doing oil replacement and antifreeze and hoses and belts, like we said, and then tires especially, because the tires, your life can depend on these tires that when you're driving down the road. We wanna expose some of this info that we don't think at the time, but in the future it can be a problem, because we don't spend a little bit more money in some good products to keep our car in the road. So hopefully this video is helpful, and with that said, for folks who are watching our video and haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like our video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here en el canal El Chano Jose.